Hello class, welcome to Unit 2.7a, Solving Literal Equations. So when you solve literal equations, it's typically going to be a lot of letters, very minimal numbers, because what we're going to be doing is working to rearrange these formulas. Usually it kind of relates to some type of formula that you use for math. So in this one, you can see it's like the principal equals interest times rate times time is what this stands for. But what we're going to be looking to do is solve for t. So when you kind of look through this, first of all, we're trying to figure out what letter are we solving for. So in this case, we are looking for solving for this t. Using your properties of equality to isolate variables and then combine like terms. So when you go through and solve for these, it's the same thing as we're looking for. So if you have that t there, what are I and r doing? And in both the situations, both of them are multiplying by t. So if we divide both sides of our equation by I and r, well, on this side, this is where they kind of cancel, leaving us with t. And on this side of the equation is just going to be p divided by I over r. So you're not going to get an actual number answer. Really, all we're looking to do is kind of rearrange essentially the original equation, solving for whatever the new variable is. So let's take a look at a few more. Okay, so in this case, we have P equals 2 times L plus W, which should look a little bit like your perimeter formula for like rectangles. But we're going to solve for W. So right now, the W is inside of these parentheses, so we're going to have to distribute first. Keep in mind we will still have to use some of those order of operation. So there we are, we got to distribute that 2 first to get it in with that 2W. This now allows us to start isolating the W. So what are we doing with that 2L? We're going to subtract that from both sides. And then lastly, if we have this 2 times W, we're going to divide both sides by 2. Now, when we get this P minus 2L times 2, technically we have that solved and that W isolated. If you think back, sometimes when you have two things up here in the top divided by a number, we can essentially break that up to be P divided by 2 minus 2L divided by 2. And you may see a formula that simplifies this because 2 divided by 2 is 1. Or you may see it simplified all the way down to that. We'll talk more about that, but if you think about those rules, one of the things you should we should be reminding you of is if you can divide both of those numbers by something in the denominator, something very similar to like doing your distributing, but with division. Okay, let's take a look at this one. X equals 5y minus 6 and solve for y. You'll see this a lot coming up in the future, so make sure we're kind of really paying attention to these. Because what we're going to be doing is taking basically a linear line here and trying to solve it for get back into the y equals mx plus b. But either way, if we're solving for y, we need to solve just like we would normally. The only thing over here on this side of the equation is x plus 6, they're not going to be like terms, so we just kind of leave it x plus 6. We're going to divide by 5, leaving us with an x plus 6 over 5. Now again, technically you're kind of done here, but what you are going to see is going to, and what we're going to want to see, is for you to break this up and say, well, that's x divided by 5 plus 6 divided by 5. Because that's going to get us back into that y equals mx plus b form. Okay, that's it. Okay, let's take a look at this last example here. Again, we're going to be solving for y. So you always start with trying to isolate everything else. So if that's a plus 2x on the outside, we need to subtract 2x to get rid of it, leaving us with a negative 3y. equals negative 2x plus 8. Now you will see me out of habit just kind of put that x first, because again the ultimate goal at the end for a lot of these is putting it into y equals mx plus b form. But if you have 8 minus 2x, that wouldn't matter either. But the next step here is we are going to want to divide by a negative 3. So this is where we're going to be careful when we do this step, because we're going to try to break this apart. Well, negative 2 divided by negative 3, that just becomes 2/3 x. And then an 8 divided by negative 3, well, we can't do that. So just leave that a fraction and negative 8 over 3. Okay. Just to kind of re-step that phase, remember this is kind of like your reverse distributing, where we can take that and divide it by 3, and you can take that and divide it by 3. And our final answer would be right here. And let's take a look at some practice. Okay, use what we just did there to kind of solve through each of these practice problems. Always solve for whatever's in the question marks. Solve for y, solve for b, solve for l, solve for r squared. And take your time and check your work. Good luck.